2021. Our invocation this evening will be offered by Lupe Moy, member of the I would ask if you are not speaking, if you would please mute your microphone to avoid any background noise. Lupe, if you would like to proceed with the invocation.
Thank you. Our loving Heavenly Father, we come before you at the beginning of this meeting and we give thanks for all that we have. 2020 was a rough year. Many lives were lost, time of uncertainty, and we're just grateful that we made it to this new year, 2021. We ask thee that thou be with us this hour, and we ask for help as we gather together. We pray for thy guidance and matters at hand, and that will clearly show to us what needs to be done regarding our city. We're grateful for everyone here, and we ask you to bless each person individually. We're grateful for all that we have, and these favors and blessings we ask thee for in the name of thy beloved Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. If you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Huff.
Here.
Perkins.
Here.
Stewart.
Here.
DeLucy.
Here.
Steinmeier.
Here.
Hobart.
Here.
Mayor Weir.
Here. Madam City Clerk, are there any citizens who requested to speak to the council this evening under citizen requests?
We had one individual, but they withdrew their request, so at this time there are none.
Okay, thank you. We do have some public hearings this evening. If you wish to speak on the public hearing, those will be coming up in a few moments. Is there anybody else who is with us this evening who would like to address the council on any item other than the public hearings? Okay, thank you very much. This brings us to our presentation resolution for the Employee of the Month. Madam City Clerk.
Bill number 21-700, a resolution recognizing Kim Slaughter, utility clerk with the Water Department, as the Employee of the Month for January 2021.
Okay, I would entertain a motion for approval of this resolution.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Madam City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Huff.
Yes.
Perkins.
Yes.
Stewart.
Yes.
DeLucy.
Yes.
Steinmeier.
Yes.
Hobart.
Yes.
Mayor Weir.
Yes. So as we're starting a new year, I'll just remind our community, we do Employee of the Month every month, and it's a wonderful tradition that we have here at the city that employees are nominated by their peers. As we're doing these virtual meetings, and previously when we were doing hybrid meetings, we've moved the Employee of the Month presentation to a different format, so we don't do those at council meetings, but they receive their resolution and acknowledgement from their departments during a separate time within their department. But we certainly want to congratulate Kim Slaughter, our utility clerk with Water Department, as being named the first Employee of the Month of 2021. So congratulations. This brings us to our consent agenda. Mayor Pro Tem.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve the reports and recommendations of the city manager.
Are there any items any council member wishes pulled for separate consideration?
Second.
Are there any items any council member?
Madam Mayor.
Separate consideration? Yes.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Items 2 and 3.
Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
can you pull resolution 21-701, please?
Yes. Okay. Madam Secretary, roll on the consent agenda minus items 2, 3, and 21-701.
Councilmembers Huff.
Yes.
Perkins. Perkins.
I think he's
Yeah.
frozen.
Stewart.
Yes.
DeLucy.
Yes.
Steinmeier.
Yes.
Hobart.
Yes.
Mayor Weir.
Yes.
Perkins.
Yes.
Councilmember DeLucy, item number 2.
Item number 2, Madam Mayor, is a request to accept the Lofton Company's proposal for a 1-year agreement with 4 1-year renewals. When I looked at it, I was confused because we don't have a copy of the contract. And in the oversheet, the fiscal impact says that the fiscal impact will be $120,000 from the city's risk management fund, but I couldn't see the risk management fund in the budget. And I tried to find it, but I couldn't find it. And then I read the proposal from Lockton, and on page 51, it says the cost to the city is $68,500 plus remunerations, but that's not going to cost the city any money. And I have enough questions that I'd like to see the contract and have this, I guess, pulled until later, till we can look at it.
Okay, Mr. City Manager?
I will ask our Director of Finance and Administration, Brian Kidney, to speak to the terms of the contract before the council.
This is, oh, Mr. Kidney, you're muted. And then I tried to talk over you. My apologies.
Okay. Apologize about that. Yeah, so there's the actual contract is the proposal in this case. So we take the proposal with this type of proposal. It wraps up into a contract very nicely, and so their proposal then becomes the contract. In regards to the remuneration, we are converting. Up to this point, Lockton has been a commission-based provider, meaning that they had an arrangement with the insurance companies they were placing the insurance with. As part of this proposal,
Stop.
we've converted them to a pure fee-based proposal, and the fees plus you mentioned remunerations come up to $120,000. They do receive part of their fee comes from one of our liability companies, States Insurance, and that's what makes up the additional amount that that you'll see there. So they get portion of their fee does come from an insurance company. I have Peter, I believe, is also on the call. If he may want to add anything to that I may have misspoke on.
This is Peter Simonson with Charlesworth Consulting. We worked with the city on this project to kind of shepherd the RFP. And Mr. Kidney's correct. We are converting from a commission-based structure to a hybrid structure. Although the proposal says that the commission doesn't cost the city anything, we do pay the commission as part of the insurance premiums. What we will do going forward for the lines that we are not going to pay commission on is have them place the insurance net of commission, which will save the city about $75,000 a year over what they have been paying under the previous payment structure. So it'll be a hybrid proposal. In addition, since the city has paid the $75,000 or paid commissions on their existing policies, the actual payment to Lockton will not begin until April 1. So, but we wanted to get this approved from the governing body so we could enter into the contract and have a resolution to the RFP that we issued.
Mr. City Manager, could you tell me where the risk management fund is located in our budget?
I don't have a copy of that document in front of me, but it's an internal service fund in our city budget.
It mentions page 140, and I looked on page 140, and nowhere near on page 140 is the $75,000 and the $68,500. I really want to see a contract. I move that we continue this until the contract is drafted and we are presented with a contract.
I'd second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
Mr. City Manager, does that put us in any kind of awkward position moving forward with this?
I believe he's locked up. I'm sure he wouldn't mind me pointing out, no, this shouldn't be a problem for us at all. We'll get with Lofton and get a contract that matches the proposal prepared and brought back in 2 weeks. That should be a problem.
Thank you,
And
Brian.
pardon me for speaking over you, Mr. Perkins. Mr. Kidney, I'm interested to see what the actual fee schedule ends up looking like for them and for us, so that I understand it a little better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we'll have we'll have Peter and his team put something together. As he talked about, we're in the middle of transitioning them from commission-based to fee-based. So, but we'll make sure it looks that it's readable and it's able to be understood. That shows that. Yeah,
I don't necessarily need that all like spelled out in some new document. I'm really interested in I just need to understand the breakdown. That's all. I'm not, fee based is easy enough to understand, but when it's a hybrid, that's all. I just need some little more direct explanation. That's it. So,
yeah, absolutely. We'll have that put in place.
Thank you very much.
Okay, is there any other discussion on the motion to postpone? Okay, hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmembers Huff,
No.
Perkins,
Yes.
Stewart,
Yes.
DeLucy,
Yes.
Steinmeier,
Yes.
Hobart,
Yes.
Mayor Ware.
Yes. Motion passes. Item number 3, Councilmember DeLucy.
I did not understand item number 3. Again, under the fiscal impact, it's very unclear what this will cost. Funds for the commodity are available in some account located on page 140. And again, I couldn't understand how much it was going to cost. So that's my question.
Madam Mayor, this is the city manager. I am back on the call, but I would ask that our Independence Power and Light Director speak to this item, please.
Jim Nail, Power and Light Director, Councilwoman DeLucy. To your question, we order, over the course of the year, we order several $100,000 worth of different cable. So I don't have an exact figure for you, but it's well within the overall materials budget for the transmission and distribution department.
You're muted. Councilmember DeLucy, you're muted.
Okay, I'm looking at it, Jim, and I'm looking at the sheet in our budget, and I just don't see where the materials are. I mean, maybe you're talking about maintenance other, but then it says software maintenance. Maybe you're talking maintenance buildings, but that says Rockwood mowing.
No, it's the warehouse inventory purchases is what this would go under.
And that's on page 140? No, it's not. I guess I'm troubled with the fiscal note because it's not where it's supposed to be. Warehouse and storage is on page 141, not 140.
I apologize. The copy I looked at, I thought it was 140, but it is the warehouse inventory purchases.
Inventory?
Yes, warehouse.
Okay,
warehouse-
2.754 million.
The
Okay,
warehouse purchases bulk amounts of a lot of our different materials that we use. That way
Okay.
they get the best rate instead of doing it job by job.
okay, I see it as 2.754 million. Thank you very much, Mr. Neal.
You're welcome.
Mr. Nail, this is Dan Hobart. Is that the number that this agenda item covers, 2.745, or is it just some part of that?
No, sir, it's just part of that. That 2.7 is all the supplies we buy for our T&D crews.
Okay, so this agenda item, your request is in line with normal purchasing and in the budget and all that?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
If there's no other question, I move approval of item number 3.
No second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmembers Huff,
Yes.
Perkins,
Yes.
Stewart,
Yes.
DeLucy,
Yes,
Steinmeier,
Yes.
Hobart,
Yes.
Mayor Ware.
Yes, item number 3 passes. Councilmember Stewart, resolution 21701.
So this is something that I've been kind of wanting to bring in front of the council for a while. I've been looking for a way to balance the idea of purchasing locally, which is very important. Purchasing from our local businesses, as well as, watching what taxpayer dollars we spend. I found this, it's actually from another municipality. And I think it's pretty easy to understand, and it's pretty much to the point. So this is what I'm asking for approval tonight. So with that, I make a motion for approval on it.
I'll second.
Okay, it was moved and seconded. I have a little bit of concern about some of the things, how this is specifically written. I agree. I mean, we've done several things and we always try to support our local economy and our businesses that are located here in Independence. And I'm sorry, Councilmember Stewart, just because of the holidays and all of that, I didn't really have an opportunity to talk to you about this in advance. But for me, what we're really trying to do is support local business and support local workforce and get more people who live here in Independence working in Independence. And to me, this does not precisely, I don't think, accomplish that. It refers to construction and not, necessarily just materials or supplies. And, over many discussions over several years, I am somewhat reluctant to do something that's kind of based on a mathematical formula because it's just very easy to manipulate. And we see that bidders simply, they just include that calculation in their bid when they suspect or realize that they may be bidding against somebody who would be subject to local preference. So I agree with what this is, what I think that you're trying to achieve with this. I'm just not quite sure that this exactly does it. So I am not going to support it tonight, but I think it's something that we should continue to work on and engage, some members of our, community who could help us to advise us. I mean, I've had discussions with many council members in many jurisdictions, and everybody's kind of trying to put their finger on how to exactly do this. So in a way that would be effective. And I'm not quite comfortable with this evening, but it's something that I would like to continue to work on and see if we can arrive at something that I think would be more targeted towards hiring people who are here in Independence. I mean, anybody can go get a post office box and say that they're an Independence business without ever really being located here or hiring local people, and so, or having a physical location here. So,
Madam Mayor, I'm sorry. I didn't
yeah,
interrupt.
no,
That's the reason I put in there a physical address.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, I like, you know, I think it's an important discussion to have, but I'm not, I just haven't, you know, some concerns about this particular resolution.
Madam Mayor, if I may.
Yes, Councilmember.
I think we're all in agreement to do what we can try to do with local businesses, with purchasing products, services from local businesses first. To massage this a little more, would it be possible to look at it to see how we can use, is there a percentage number of local workforce that could be built into some of these companies that will do construction work or some service type of work, that can give us some stronger strength wording that would be built into the contracts, as opposed to just a dollar amount for services, but have it actually a percentage of workforce, local workforce that would be hired in, if that makes any sense. So I guess perhaps the question is to the council, would it be wise to postpone this and maybe massage this out just a little bit more to see what kind of language we can tighten this up and to get what we're really wanting to get into this with local workforce and the like?
I would be open to that.
I would too, Mr. Perkins. I think that may be one thing we're all on board with, is doing what we can for our local businesses. So, but we, as the mayor pointed out, we should do it wisely and effectively. Not that Mr. Stewart's definitely a good conversation starter.
Absolutely.
Yes.
If I may, Mayor, I will say that our policy does currently have a local preference for local labor also.
Yeah.
It's in contracts which exceed 300,000.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we were attempting to do with this, with the council members' guidance on this, was not to change that one, but just to add the kind of addenda to add this into the policy on top of the, we have the Missouri products, we have obviously built United States product preferences, the local labor preference, and now this would add another preference. And I understand your comments are definitely taken, which are wise, of it may not be a large or have as much impact, but the one thing I do like about this is it makes staff on the procurement side, the departments, that there is a process they'll have to go through, that they consciously have to think of a local business before they finish the procurement. And that was my biggest hope on this, is that this would at least be something that reminds departments to make sure to look at local first. So
yeah. And we changed the 300,000 from 500,000 a few years ago, and that was a really positive step. I think it's really close. I just think we could, there was a couple little things that just caused some concern, and I think, we could just maybe spend a little time looking it over some more and getting some input, and maybe bringing it back with a little more teeth. A little less wiggle room. So that's what my concerns are. And, really identifying, what is it that we're trying to achieve. We're trying to support local business, and we're trying to get people who live here opportunities to work. So I think we can, just with a little more time, we could maybe clarify that a little bit. So Councilmember Stewart, do you want to make a motion to postpone?
Yes, I'll make a motion to postpone.
Okay.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmember Tough,
Yes.
Perkins,
Yes.
Stewart,
Yes.
Delucci,
Yes.
Steinmeier,
Yes.
Hobart,
Yes.
Mayor Weir.
Yes, motion passes. We have two public hearings this evening. The first is an application by Raycon Inc. for an unlimited retailer of intoxicating liquor and Sunday sales license for 17001 East US 24 Highway. This is a full public hearing. Mr. Scannell, are you going to be presenting this?
Yes, Mayor and members of the council. My name is Tom Scannell. I'm the Community Development Director. Raycon Inc. is looking to operate a retailer of intoxicating liquor at 17001 East 24 Highway. This location was the previous flooring store along 24 Highway. Since that business has left, the property has been marketed. Raycon seeks that liquor license to operate their establishment there. Again, this is a packaged liquor establishment. There is residential within 300 feet of this premise, so it will require the 2/3 majority vote. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Scannell. Are there any comments or questions from the council on the public hearing? This is a full public hearing. So, I'm sorry.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Madam Mayor. Mr. Scannell,
But go ahead.
am I doing stuff out of order?
No, I did, but go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Scannell, isn't this over by Hawthorne? Is that the residential is that right or no? I'm
Yes,
looking at the map, but.
Yeah, it is located east of 291 on 24 Highway, so it's over by Hawthorne. There's some closer residential that is behind 24 Highway that is closer to this establishment.
Did any of those folks object or show up to planning or anything that you know of?
We have not received any calls from anyone who was notified.
I'm a little bit troubled that it's so close to all that. But that's just me anyway.
Mr. Scannell, this is Delucci. I used to live there and it's very close to where I lived. I mean, in back of that building is a hill and that's where the kids sleigh ride. And that hill was owned by the Boy Scouts of America. So when you say you sent notice to 185 feet, did it actually go to residences? Or did it go to the Boy Scouts of America located someplace else?
So it went to the property owners. I'm looking at the ownership list. It went to property owners who lived on Downey Court, North
East 7th Street, Terrace Court North.
Yes.
My old street, that's right.
Some of the property owners, since it's commercial, they're located in other, some in Kansas City, Louisville, places like that. So those were the property owners who were notified.
Thank you.
Okay, the part that I skipped over, which is the most important part, this is a full public hearing. So is there anyone in the meeting this evening who would like to speak in support of this application? Is there anybody wishing to speak in opposition? Okay, are there any other comments or questions from the council on the public hearing? Then I will close the public hearing. Madam City Clerk.
Council action is requested regarding the application received from Raycon Inc. for an unlimited retailer of intoxicating liquor and Sunday sales located at 17001 East US 24 Highway.
Is there any discussion on this bill?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
as I mentioned earlier, I lived on the bottom of that hill, and that hill is used by many youth for sleigh riding. There's a community garden at the base of that hill. It is a Jennings Manor subdivision. And I'm sure that a lot of those people did not get noticed because the Boy Scouts of America own that hill.
Mm-hmm.
It is very close to residential, not just Jennings Manor, but also Hawthorne. That neighborhood is struggling for survival, and I don't think this is going to help them survive. I will be voting no.
Okay, very good. Any other comments or questions? Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmembers Huff,
Yes.
Perkins,
No.
Stewart,
No.
DeLucy,
No.
Steinmeier,
Yes.
Hobart,
No.
Mayor Ware.
No. The ordinance fails. Our next public hearing is to receive input from a proposed resiliency and cash balance policy. Mr. City Manager?
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, the establishment of fund balance policies for all of our major funds was one of the major deliverables of our Independence for All strategic plan. We've continued to refine those, and in particular have been looking at the Independence Power and Light cash balance policy. We have done a tremendous amount of work on that. This has been reviewed with the Public Utilities Advisory Board, who I know there's some concurrent action later on your agenda tonight with that. But I know that the council wanted to make sure a decision of this magnitude had the opportunity for some additional public hearing. So our city staff, Mr. Kidney in particular, has taken the lead on this. I'll see if Mr. Kidney has any additional comments for the council. Otherwise, we'd be happy to yield for the public hearing. Mr. Kidney?
No, I think you covered it perfectly there, and I can address the next item when we get to that point.
Okay, very good. So this is a full public hearing. Is there anyone present who would like to speak on this public hearing? Okay, oh, I see your hand raised. Okay. Go ahead.
Oh, trying to turn up. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My camera's not turning on. I apologize for that. My name is Jason White. I live at 1024 South Forest here in Independence, Missouri. Thank you very much for having a public hearing on this matter. Having a municipal power company is a huge responsibility, and it is very complicated, and it's deserving of this kind of engagement. This is unlike most other businesses. You were just discussing a liquor store that has to figure out demand and supply and costs and revenue to stay afloat. The demand and supply and for Mr. Nail to run the power company is much different because it suffers under the effects of the weather. And how the heck you predict that in Missouri? He's dealing with the Southwest Power Pool, the grid, national regulations, shifting from fossil to renewable energies, trying to formulate this policy has impact on my neighbors that have fixed incomes and are affected by utility rates. This impacts economic development. You're running a power company is a huge obligation, and you all are to be commended for being the only city council in the entire metropolitan area that has to worry about an electric company. And that is quite a challenge. And so for that point of the extra time that you all have to engage as community leaders, because you have a power company, you're to be commended for that investment. I am part of Indy Energy. That is a group of 3 of us that have been involved since 2014, engaged in energy issues here in town, not only environmental issues, but economic, weatherization, all kinds of issues. We have a wonderful website found at indyenergy.org, occasional newsletters that you can sign up for there, and we do forums. Our very next forum is on the 16th. We do those to try to stimulate debate and discussion and give people around town access to some wonderful experts from around the region and actually from around the country. We're at a good place in this conversation in our community. The management analyst report from this summer, the DKMT consulting report from this fall, and the recent PFM advisors report. That particular report provided some wonderful understanding of a very complicated issue. Looking at how to deal with the fund surplus and IPL is not as easy as simply looking at my checkbook at the end of the month to see whether I ended with enough to head to McDonald's or not. It is a complicated issue, and they brought forward an understandable report that provided some options for good conversation and to provide you all the guidance to make good decisions. The issue of the surplus has been around for some time, and Indy Energy brought it forward about 6.5 years ago, right after we got started. But this report really brings clarity to options, either debt reduction, retaining some of that surplus, refunding some of it in some manner. And so those are worthy of conversation and worthy of your all's engagement through this public hearing. You all are to be commended again, and I realize that's a little odd. I'm sort of known as being a little cantankerous at times, but you need to realize you've been 10 years as a city council without a rate increase for IPL. And that's pretty impressive. And during that time, you have come through with a 6% rate decrease. You have shifted our rates from being clearly the highest in the region to being not the highest in the region. And that's something to be recognized for. Some of the conversation around what to do with this surplus, some has gone to some sort of rate reduction or refund to the ratepayers around the issue of the COVID, the pandemic that we're suffering from. We're not sure we think that's the best use of these funds. The primary issue we would like to bring forward is I and none of you need a rate reduction because of the economic disaster that's befallen us from the pandemic. There are members of our community, there are neighbors that are suffering. You all made a wonderful decision by moving some federal funds into support for them through supporting their electric bills, and that $2.2 million was a wise investment. That was a win-win-win. Citizens benefited, IPL benefited, the general fund benefited. That was a wise use, but it was a focused use. It was a focused response to that need. Making a refund of these rates in general to the citizenry because of that pandemic doesn't provide a focused effort to try to provide the needs for those that are truly in trouble. If you do debt reduction, you have a multiplication factor. So if you reduce the debt by $100 today, then you have eliminated the interest payment in the future. And that can turn into multiple millions of dollars of savings to the ratepayers. So you are enabling the community to sustain that protracted period of time where you as a body don't have to consider a rate increase. So our emphasis is looking at the rate reduction as use of that current surplus. You could spend it. Spending on AMI would certainly be a smart thing to do, but we're in the middle of a pandemic, and we know even though 80% of the citizens of the nation now use smart meters, that will cause conversation in our community, and that's not a wise use of these funds at this time in the middle of a pandemic when citizens need to be able to engage in a conversation. People have discussed spending the money on buying turbines. Someday those things need to be replaced. But that calculation isn't as simple as the heater has gone out in my home because it's old and rusty. Those are part of the equation of Southwest Power Pool, and they're more of a capacity than they are a production. And so they need to be viewed differently on when they need to be replaced. So we're not quite sure you've gotten the last ounce of use out of them before we spend millions of dollars, to replace them. There are indeed charter implications in this conversation. We respect that the charter is over 60 years, close to 60 years old. I think we're a year short now. But applying those surplus to the debt is within the construct of the charter, just as providing funds back to the ratepayers. Touching on the charter for just a moment, I'm going to wobble a bit, but the charter also expects our PUAB to be providing us an annual report, which we think is valuable to the citizens. And Indy Energy hasn't seen one of those. We saw a PowerPoint once that the city manager at the time told us was the annual report. That's sort of like the same as expecting the list of priorities that the council and the PUAB are discussing. That's a wise use of the PUAB to guide the broad conversations on how to make the best use out of IPL for the benefit of the citizens and the businesses here in our community. We also think that's where these hearings ought to be done. Planning Commission does hearings, other groups do hearings, and then council does abbreviated engagement in those, but deep dives into the weeds are something for the PUAB to be doing. And whereas they should be doing them around rate increases, they should be doing them around rate decreases, and they should be doing them around these types of expenditures. So whereas we fully applaud the council spending the time to engage with the citizens and offer a chance to have public discourse, we think this is better. It's better served for that deep dive of a conversation such as public hearings to be done at the Public Utility Advisory Board level and not necessarily at consuming the time of the city council. You could certainly use the surplus for starting to build a new power plant. There's been conversation around town about the wisdom of that. That idea brings you to either building a natural gas plant or a coal plant, and frankly, both of them cost enormous sums of money. We're talking multiple hundreds of millions of dollars for gas and multiple billions for coal. Frankly, the regulatory financial environment don't make any sense. I'm not sure whose backyard you would build it in. But frankly, the end equation for us is the fact that we don't think the ratepayers should backstop that kind of an expenditure. That's no longer something that the City of Independence should be giving serious consideration to. The changes in the environment happen so rapidly that making an investment you're going to be responsible for 40 or 60 years, the life of a power plant, doesn't make sense when you need to be nimble with your money to be providing us the purchases of power from a variety of sources to keep our rates at the lowest. Retaining some of the money more than maybe the recommendation might actually be wise as we look at two of your biggest utilizers of electricity, Unilever. They have a international corporation policy that tries to move them to being carbon neutral in a very rapid fashion. And so will they someday put up a lot of solar panels on their roof or their parking area? You have challenges to our retail. Our retail structures are great demands of power. And if we see a shift, and it doesn't have to be a tomorrow shift, but a shift in the next 3 to 5 years, then some sort of retention beyond what the experts might not be a bad idea. Some of the surplus should absolutely be spent in reactivating the FERC accounting. Talk about a dive into the weeds. Not sure how many of the citizens listening have a clue what FERC is. I'm not sure I can tell you, but I can tell you it cost us $2.5 million last year because we had some issues with some documentation for Southwest Power Pool, and it turned into costing us. So re-energizing that accounting process, not only for our engagement with Southwest Power Pool, but for those FERC audits that come along on an irregular basis, is a good expenditure. And if we can save another 2.5. Let me wrap up. You have a tremendous asset. It has many challenges. We think you're headed in the right direction by having the outside experts provide thoughtful engagement for the citizens and the PUAB and the council to debate and use to make good decisions. We think you've got a good director on board that's showing promise in leading that organization to improved management. We think you've It's been successful in avoiding rate increases and the rate decreases. The use of the surplus, we would emphasize, should be directed towards the debt reduction, because that provides a greater benefit to the ratepayers over the life of the surplus that's available. It's not wrong if you choose to spend some for some sort of rate decrease or refund, but we do think you get more benefit for the citizens by looking at debt reduction. Thank you very much for the time in this public hearing, and we wish you well as you make your decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on the public hearing? Mr. City Manager, we have 3 items coming up this evening related to Independence Power and Light. I know that we have additional action that needs to be taken and discussion that needs to happen in subsequent meetings. I think it would be helpful for the public to understand sort of the sequence of events, that these items this evening aren't to stand on their own, but there will be required some additional action. So maybe you could just kind of paint that picture for everybody, please.
Certainly, I'll try to simplify. If you or the other members of the council would like additional detail after that, please let me know. What we are considering here tonight is a policy around how much excess reserves Independence Power and Light should hold. That's been a number that's oscillated back and forth over the years. There's been times where we feel like we've had too much. There's been times where we feel like we've had too little. This is intended to set both a defined policy, but then also what you might refer to as a margin of error, plus or minus certain percentage points within that target range, so that if we have a bad summer where we don't collect a lot of revenue, or we were to lose a major customer and it took a hit, we wouldn't have to take some sort of draconian action in response to that. So this provides both a target amount and a range, if you will, of how much to have on hand to meet our needs. Then associated with that is a resolution, or I think it's listed tonight as a non-ordinance action item, that the PUAB, Public Utility Advisory Board, asked the council to consider, which was to tighten up that margin of error, or that range that I'm referencing. So staff developed this in concert with our financial advisor, PFM. The Public Utility Advisory Board felt like that could be tightened up by just a little bit. Staff does not have a concern with that, and it would be fine being supportive of that. I think that's truly just, arguing about the margins, and certainly not something we need to have a long drawn out argument about. Then the final item on tonight, Mayor, would be setting a course for us moving forward about how we begin to apply those monies that are above and beyond that new range that we're setting. Specifically then starting to look at debt reduction, and then putting our feet on the path that the Energy Master Plan laid out for us, beginning to prioritize investment in replacing our combustion turbines, or CTs, if you will. So then at your meeting that would be coming up here, January 11th, there would be a generation update, how our power is produced and ways that we do that. That would be your study session next week. And then your next regular meeting, which is Tuesday the 19th, because of the Dr. King holiday, that's where the council would consider a resolution applying the remainder of the excess funds to defease the bonds that are most appropriate. That's a 2010 series, I believe, that would be prioritized for defeasance. So within the course of the next 3 weeks, lots of action, but I think that gets our fund, the electric utility fund, cleaned up, and the excess revenues or funds that we have on hand applied in a manner that's consistent with the new cash policy as well as the charter.
Okay, thank you. Are there other comments or questions from the council on the public hearing? Yes.
Well, I just wanted to I had some questions for Mr. Walker.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Okay. So looking at the charter, it says pilot payments, it says, and this is regarding the surplus and monies from IPL to the city. It says pilot payments. It says providing for depreciation accruals and amortization of bonds, then reasonable accumulation of surplus, and then finally all annual profits go to rate reductions. So my question with that in mind, Mr. Walker, is because I'm trying to get a picture of what all these individual parts are doing. Are you saying that these proposals all fit within that?
They are interrelated. Oh, yeah, I'll make sure I'm unmuted. They are interrelated with one another, Councilmember Hobart. So kind of taking this in a linear fashion, the item that would be considered by the council once this public hearing is closed would set the cash reserve policy that was developed with the recommendations of city staff and the PFM, or the utility financial advisor. Then just a few moments later on your agenda, we would have the agenda item that was put forward by the PUAB, which would further tighten up that swing or margin of error, the plus or minus amount within that target cash reserve amount. So now we are now able to have a quantified number of what we mean when we say excess. So that number wasn't laid out for us in the charter. It wasn't identified as a certain percent. So this is this council making a policy decision about what they want that term excess to mean. So that would set that number for us. Then the item that would come up finally on the agenda tonight would start to prioritize how we begin to apply the amount that is above and beyond that cash reserve policy that we've got. And it talks about applying it towards debt service reduction, and then beginning to take a look at the production issue, the generation issue, which we believe falls within the business practices of what the charter is asking us to do with Independence Power and Light.
I want to clarify several things in there. First, which I hope will be the easiest.
Sure.
And even Mr. White mentioned this. I don't see that the charter allows us to write checks back to ratepayers. It says you can apply the annual profits to rate reductions, but I don't see where it allows us to provide a rebate or a refund. Maybe, am I in line with that? Are you in agreement with that, or what's your take on it?
Councilmember, to be perfectly honest, first and foremost, we've never found ourselves in a situation where we've had the opportunity to do that. And then we've not had the ability to get an advisory opinion on how that would be interpreted. So I think a lot of different folks could look at that and have some different takes, and we just don't have I would feel more comfortable recommending to the council, if they wanted to look more seriously at that, getting an advisory legal opinion. So we would move forward with a little bit more confidence about that. Absent that, I think there's enough vague language around that there could be some confusion about how that were to be applied.
If I voted for this tonight, am I saying that I agree that we could write a check to ratepayers?
My recommendation to you as manager is that your vote in support of the item that comes up after this public hearing is saying, this is my, when I say my, I mean the council. This is the council's policy interpretation of what reasonable surplus is to mean, to have adequate cash on hand to deal with, line power restoration, tree trimming, all the unforeseen events that may come up as a responsibility of owning an electric utility. Then the subsequent items are prioritizing how to apply the surplus above and beyond the newly adopted cash reserve policy. And it's my recommendation to you that is focused nearly exclusively on debt service reduction, and then beginning to prioritize making investments in power generation, making sure that we have adequate power generation for our community and for our customers. I don't interpret any of this to be applied towards rate reduction or rate rebates or writing a check or anything like that.
I appreciate that. Let me ask you something about the setting the reserve, because in the resolution it mentions that, you know, city council set a policy a couple of years ago for a 63-day reserve fund. That's what the reserve should be, or, you know, so, and we should, I guess, plus the debt service in 63 days. Beyond that, that would have been where we got our surplus now. What are you saying that now it's going to be a floating number based on factors, customer base, ratepayers, weather, national changes?
Yeah. So what this would do would set that instead of the days on hand, it would set it as a percentage, which is what you see in line with your other major governmental funds in the city. Those all have 16% reserve as the target amount. This one is just under that. It's 15.8%. And I believe with a plus or minus of 10 points on the other side. I'd have to have Adam Norris clarify that for me, make sure I've got that exactly right for you. But we think the percentage is a better methodology, council member, because of the variance that can come into play. You know, if we find ourselves in a recessionary economy and there's an increase in price index of materials or the goods that Power and Light relies upon, that percentage gives us that variance to keep up with market factors more so than the days on hand gives us.
And this percentage calculation, this is recommended by PFM as well?
Yes, sir.
I had another question then, and maybe a few more, but I might be close to done. And maybe Mr. Norris is better equipped to answer this, but has the PUAB, have they reviewed any or all of this? What parts of this have they reviewed and what parts have they recommended?
Well, I'll tell you, and Adam can correct me if we miss anything here, but this presentation that the council had at your last study session from PFM was provided to the PUAB at their last meeting that they had in 2021. So they had or 2020, jumping ahead here. They had a same review, and in fact, I think their conversation was a little bit more in depth and lengthy than the one that the council had. So I think they did a good job of getting a very thorough presentation and asking the kind of questions that allowed for a pretty robust discussion.
Okay, so ultimately then, and this is a bigger picture thing, which is through my thoughts on the PUAB and how I see our role in this. Ultimately, it looks as if we're going to change some methodology to calculate the reserve to be more effective and more efficient. It's a better business practice, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and on top of that, the bigger, longer term goal, of course, is to, well, and then we're going to deal with whatever we think the surplus is in whatever way we think that's right. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then finally, we have to decide, do we have to decide this power generation issue? The combustion turbines, that's the only power generating asset we have left. These 6 or 8, isn't it? Combustion turbines?
Yes, 6 of those.
Okay. And these things are dying or on their end of life somewhere each?
Yeah, when we did our energy master plan, which was 2 years ago, it was thought at that time that in the best of scenarios, those had somewhere between 5 and 9 years of useful life left. You know, different engineers would look at that and tell you different amounts, but a safe range was 5 to 9 years. 2 years later now, of course, we're down to 3 to 7 years of useful life left in those. And This isn't something that you would just, go buy off a shelf. This would take some time to have engineered and delivered and set up. So the lead time on this would probably bump right up against that minimum range, which is the 3 years.
So what this all boils down to then is let's clean up our business practices a bit. And then long term, the goal would be to replace the combustion turbines. Has the PUAB discussed this? Is that like sort of the overview we're looking at today?
Well, I'll tell you what, let me high level here, and then let me bring Mr. Kidney in because this is kind of his baby. I'm bragging on his baby here. But 3 things to kind of summarize this. You're setting a cash reserve policy so that we have a quantifiable way to discuss what we mean when we look at the charter and say excess funds or surplus. You're prioritizing how you're going to apply any amount that's above presently on that, which we're recommending go towards debt service because we have an opportunity to defease a bond and create liquidity, or what the more layman term, cash flow, cash on hand, and then begin to use that newfound liquidity or cash flow to start to target and address what the Energy Master Plan prioritized for us next, which is this issue of generation, base load, what the CTs are addressing right now. Brian, you want to clean up any loose ends here?
Yeah, thank you, Zach. You're on top of it. I will clarify a couple things logistically. How the resolution, or the next item of the resolution to accept the resiliency and cash balance policy, it is the policy itself is how you calculate the annual target that you'll go for. So what this would be doing is giving the city council and the city manager direction each budget year. So at the end of each fiscal year, we would go back through, would go through these risk analysis, those calculations that we have set in that policy. And it would be a new amount based on whatever risks are associated. So just like everyone's been talking about tonight, there could be different things. They'll adjust that target. So once that target is set and as part of the budget process, then that would be the opportunity then, and I think it's one that we'll be addressing later in another resolution. Okay, now that you've established what that target is, there's excess amounts over that target, and then that's the next item of what's the best use of that target. And as Zach mentioned, we do plan on bringing on January 19th a resolution to defease the 2010 bonds. And then on January 11th, which is actually next week, there's another presentation to talk very specifically about the future of generation. So tonight's actions very specifically, the first one is just setting up how we calculate that that range or that target for council to make considerations on whether or not it's over or under that target, and what the council wishes to do to get it back to target.
Is Director Nail still on the call? Can I ask him a couple questions?
Please do.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Mr. Nail. Have you seen this resolution? Are you familiar with the change they're talking about doing?
Yes, I am, and I've sat through all the presentations.
And you attend the PUAB meetings as well?
I do.
So my real question for you is, as director of IPL, do you think this resolution and the accompanying ones, do you believe that those are in the best business practices for IPL?
I do. I support them.
And just as a bystander then, from sitting in on the PUAB meetings, as far as you know, they're on board with this too. So everybody's on the same page, and it's a good idea. That's what I'm getting at.
Yes, in fact, I believe some members of the PUAB complimented PFM on what an excellent presentation it was, the quality of the data that was presented, and how clearly they were able to understand it. The only change came in was that one of the members recommended the lower bound instead of the middle bound. Other than that, they were solidly on board with moving this forward with their recommendation to you.
And do you feel that same way as Director of IPL about the PFM presentation and recommendations?
I do think they did an excellent job. I think this was to try to understand what the cash reserve or the reserve policy is and all the different things that are wrapped up in it. If you look at our previous financial reports, you'll see debt reserve and you'll see operating reserve. That's the 67 days everyone's used to seeing. You'll see the capital reserve that is already committed. All of those things bundled together, plus the confidence factors that PFM analyzed, all that is bundled together in this. And I think it was an excellent way to help understand how the operation can be on a sound financial footing.
This is, I appreciate you providing your opinion on this, and obviously it's your job to do so and be involved. But this is that's one thing that Mr. White said. This is complex financial data, and it's really hard to put together, especially for a layperson. And IPL is such a big asset for the city that I don't, and nobody wants to make. We want to avoid all mistakes we can and do the best business. So if you're in agreement with it and you think it's a good idea, then I'm on board with it. So I appreciate that, Mr. Nail, and I'm sure everybody else has questions too. So thank you very much, everybody.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. Mr. City Manager, I think we'll just kind of take care, since these three things kind of go all hand in hand. I'm just going to kind of address my questions, and maybe they cross-cut all three. The presentation that we received at our last meeting from PFM, which has been referenced, they really provided 4 different options to defease the 2010 bonds, to defease the 2012 A bonds, to address capital improvement needs, and target rate adjustments. So these aren't necessarily prioritized, although I think that there's a general consensus that defeasing the bonds and getting rid of debt is probably a good idea. So I would say really those could be captured in 3 priorities, which is debt reduction, investment and capital improvements, and targeted rate adjustment. I agree with you, Councilman Hobart. I've never seen anywhere in the charter where it says give a rebate or a refund or cash back. I think that's very problematic, but I do think that, especially in the circumstances that we are currently find ourselves in, with so many of our businesses not able to operate at 100%, that we may be able to do, consider a one-time temporary rate adjustment, perhaps. So I've spent a lot of time over the last couple of weeks looking over all of this information and trying to make sure that it all fits together. And I feel like I'm confident that it does, but that it took some understanding about what decisions are still yet to come, which are not on tonight's agenda. So, Mr. City Manager, just, please jump in and correct me if I misstate this, but I think that what we're seeing is a demonstration of an agreement between the PFM study, the PUAB recommendations that are coming forward in the form of these non-ordinance action items, and after this item, and this staff recommendation on the resolution to implement the cash balance policy. It's just not all coming in one single action. So in order to really I think, accept the recommendations or the options that were presented to us by PFM is going to take a couple different actions by the council. So this is the first of those, which is to establish the policy. Then later this evening, we have consideration of establishing priorities, which the PUAB addresses two of the three: debt and they use the term refunding the ratepayers of the electric utility. The charter requires that to be in the form of rates, not in the form of cash. So I think that's, we can discuss that when the time comes, if that's the language that we're comfortable with. And then the second recommendation for the POAB addresses the other item, which is the capital improvements. So I think it took me quite a bit of time to understand how that all fit together, but I feel comfortable that it does. And then with the presentation that's coming next week, and then the additional action that's coming subsequent to that, will allow the council to give specific direction on the outstanding fund balance or the excess revenue that we currently have, about how we want to apply those within the parameters of debt, capital improvements, and rates. Have I said that accurately?
You have.
Okay, thank you. Other comments or questions from the council? Okay, then I will close. I would close the public hearing and ask the city clerk to proceed with the item.
Bill number 21-702, a resolution directing the city manager to implement a resiliency and cash balance policy.
I think Mr. Huff, I'm sorry to, I think Mr. Huff is,
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Councilman Hobart. I'm all in agreement with this, the bond reduction. That's not a problem there. I'm just having a hard time figuring out how a person can sit there and tell me that the charter doesn't say what it says there, and then tell me that it's almost 60 years old. I don't care if it's 160 years old. Until it's changed, it says rate reduction. How you want to do it is immaterial to me. If you go with a rate reduction and then you hear about it because of the general fund, which has it's not supposed to have, these utilities are not supposed to have any impact on the general fund. But everybody wants to lead it into that. That's what was brought up about doing a check. So it didn't affect that. But the charter clearly says rate reduction, excess funds. Sure, let's take care of our bonds, the long term, but someone to sit there and tell me that this charter is 60 years old, well, then change the charter. That's all I have.
Madam Mayor, it's DeLucci. I also have some comments. Are we going to read the bill number and then you're going to have council member comments, or should I?
Why don't we read the bill and then we'll open it up for more discussion? Yeah.
Thank you.
Madam City Clerk.
Bill number 21-701, a resolution directing the city manager to implement a resiliency and cash balance policy in the city's utility funds using a risk-based methodology to ensure the city utilities have funds available to provide for long-term financial stability and system reliability, and amend resolution 6201.
Okay. Councilmember DeLucci.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. First, just an error on Becky's part. It's 21-702, not 701. I just want to make the record clear because I know we're going to have a vote on this.
Yeah, my apologies.
Then not a problem. And I think we're confusing apples, oranges, and penguins. This resolution directs the city manager to implement a cash balance policy for all the utility funds, all three of them, not just IPL. And the only information I have before me is IPL. So then I look at the information that has been presented to me, And the purpose, the very first line of the utility cash reserve policy for electric is to help ensure financial stability, timely completion of capital improvements, and enable the utility to meet requirements for large unexpected expenditures. A targeted cash reserve policy should be established. Well, in 2017, the council decided a targeted cash reserve policy was 67 days. And I think that was around $26 million. And now all of a sudden, out of the blue, other than one or two references by a company that could not answer my questions last time, we're going from 60 some days to 209 days. The 60 some days was to maintain our ability to operate the utility. It was not to ensure financial stability, timely completion of capital improvements, or unexpected expenditures. So then I look at the budget that we passed last summer, and I'm looking and I see our capital improvement budget is $5.2 million. Our debt service budget is $10.5 million, which means it's about $16 million. And yet this is talking about how much money? I mean, millions of dollars. Let's look. How much? I can't even remember the number. Let me look at all my numbers here. $67 million. The charter does not talk about cash reserve policy for the electric in order to ensure financial stability. We have a responsibility, and I understand the PUAB also had this presentation by that firm. Not one citizen spoke before the PUAB. So to say that the PUAB had a public hearing is not really true. And to say that we're having a public hearing on the internet is not really true. So I guess I have two questions. One, are we doing it for all the utilities? And if so, what effect will it have on water and stormwater? And two, why is 209 days better than 67? Those are my two questions.
Mr. City Manager?
Yes, thank you. I will go ahead and ask our Finance Administration Director, Brian Kidney, to explain how this is being applied.
So, yeah, this would include any utility. The direction would be having the council look at, or have the city manager bring forward and the council look at a risk-based fund balance methodology, which is what this is. So this resolution could cover all three utilities. Obviously, we only have the electric one at this point. Next month, I believe we'll bring in the water and the WBC.
So are we doing 16% for those other two, or we're just not sure right now?
Those studies are not complete for water and WBC.
I notice under the fiscal impact, this establishes a targeted range for cash balances in the city's utilities. That's plural. So that each year the city manager will use this target to prepare and present the annual budget. So each year we're going to decide what the target is. Is that what this whole thing is about?
The resolution in front of you is setting up the calculation, saying this is how you will calculate the fund balance for the budget each year.
Okay, then tell me, how are we doing that?
We did attach, I believe there's an attachment showing the actual calculations.
Or the summary of revenue and expense risks? That one sheet of paper?
It is actually a fairly detailed report that is summarizing.
So how much money are we looking at water for the reserve? Do we know?
I'll turn, Chris, I'm not sure how far you are along in that study.
Yes, this is Chris Lover of PFM. We started down the road with water, and then we realized that it would be probably better or easier to do it with water pollution control first. So we're probably 90% through with water pollution control. We're applying a similar methodology, looking at revenue risk, expense risk, capital improvement programs, and working capital. So a very, very similar framework applied across the 3 utility systems so that there is some consistency. In your packet, you have a few pages titled Utility Cash Reserve Policy for Electric. And this is essentially a few-page summary of how we came to that $67 million target. And I think one thing I did want to also mention is that I've heard this number 63 days, 67 days. And I think that is a bit like comparing penguins to apples when you look at the work that PFM has done. That 60-day number, the first question that we had was, well, what does that represent? And what type of risk does that represent? And there's not really a good definition of that. Secondly, that 60-odd day amount doesn't include your debt service coverage of 10%, nor your pilot. And if you look at those 3 categories, which are essentially required payments, those total about 90 days. So in reality, your policy was really closer to 150 days. So this policy is not as different as the prior one after you dig a little deeper into the issue and what that 60-odd days actually represented and what that policy stated. It is higher, and I think we could say it's higher because we've done an analysis of the market, meaning what is your risk in terms of natural gas prices, the price of electricity in the market. So we feel pretty confident in what this represents being a higher level of cash, higher levels of days cash, and on the surface, it does look to be markedly different, but when you delve into it and add in the debt service, the coverage, and the pilot, which you're required to do, then it's really not as diverse and different as the initial shock value is.
Chris, when you all appeared before us a couple weeks ago on this computer, I asked a question of what's reasonable for depreciation accruals, and nobody answered that question. Do you have an answer to that question yet?
In my mind, depreciation accrual represents your capital improvement plan. So you are looking at what is your depreciation expense by year, what we call an account called, your basically your accrued depreciation. So how much has your asset deteriorated over time?
And so you're saying I'm sorry, go ahead.
So what we're saying is that this policy looks at a level for a capital improvement program, like setting aside a capital reserve, which we think addresses that I'll call it a unique term that you find in your charter.
So what's the number for depreciation accruals of the 67 million?
Well, if you go to the capital policy we did, or the capital analysis that we looked at, we examined essentially, what you have about a $10 to $14 million range. And in fact, some of your assets have depreciated at a higher rate, close to $20 million. So our recommended level is actually well below what some of your observed annual depreciation expense has been.
So there is no number you can give me?
I think I just gave you a couple numbers here. So, the first one I
missed it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, your depreciation expense has been as high as $19 million.
And as low as what?
I'll have to pull that here. It looks like 16. I'll have to go back and look at that one if you give me a second. And we're recommending a level that's $12 million, 12.6, which is well below that depreciation expense.
Okay, so 12.6 for depreciation. How about amortization of bonds? How much of that 67 million are you suggesting the amortization of bonds?
Those, I think, as we discussed previously, the amortization of the bonds are a function of what you're actually financing. For example, if you're building a plant, you can finance that and amortize it over 30 years. If you're financing a meter reading system or some other vehicles, for example, you can only finance that for 7 years. So it's really quite different. And you'd have to delve into each and every asset that IP&L has to figure out what that appropriate level is. We usually do a big asset, so we would say it's 30 years.
So is any part of that 67 million part of amortization of bonds?
That's your debt service and your debt service coverage, which is incorporated into some of the risk areas, primarily loss of a large customer, which we talked about, and also general economic shock to the area.
I'm sorry, how much, do you have a number for debt service or not?
Yes, I do. If you give me 1 second here, I have to go through some of my additional files. Just give me a second if you don't mind.
Thank you.
On your depreciation expense, let me answer that question first. It has been high as $19 million, $19.6 million in 2015, and it's been as low as $13.3 million in 2019.
Okay, and you said it was 12.6. Okay.
That's a recommended level that we've incorporated into this recommended level.
I got it.
And then your next question was,
how much is the debt service of the 67 million?
The debt service that we've incorporated in here, again, let me see if I can find my one sheet. Let's see, your operating expenses, sorry, your days cash. I'm sorry, your debt service and your coverage. And when I add those two together, it's about $11.8 million. Your debt service plus your coverage for the year 2019.
What do you mean coverage?
Well, you have to have, you're required by your bond documents to have 10% above what your debt service requires.
Oh, okay, okay.
So you have to have a little bit of excess. So we've incorporated this number into some of the risk areas that are addressed, primarily the revenue risk, and then the first two categories of revenue risk. So it's incorporated in a manner by looking at those other risks. We don't specifically say, you know, this is what you need.
Okay. So I add 12.6 to 11.8 and I get 24.4. And yet you're recommending 67 million?
67 million is the recommended target level for the risks that we've looked at for IPL.
Did you look at our charter at all to see what our responsibility is to the citizens of the city?
We did review the charter, but primarily we're looking at what the risks are facing the utility. In terms of how do you operate a stable utility so that there's enough cash at that utility so that you don't have to turn around to your ratepayers and suddenly impose a 10 or 15% rate increase to address any problems that might arise.
Right. Thank you. Do you have a number though? Wait a minute. I forgot. Do you have a number for water?
I do not have a number for water yet. We're still waiting on a little bit of data from the utility on some of their expenses so we can better understand what their expense risk is.
So, Mr. City Manager, by voting yes on this, are we voting on something that we don't have any information on?
No, Councilwoman, the way I would understand this is that you're setting the methodology, how you'll calculate this for the three utilities. And then, of course, that calculation will need to be performed annually. I think what Mr. Lover is telling you is he doesn't have the data to have that first snapshot of what the methodology, the formula will spit out for the water and water pollution control funds. But this sets the framework of how to calculate this on an annual basis.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Councilman.
If I could dive in just a little bit. Mr. Kidney, So as we're looking to see how these numbers are adding up to the 62 million that we're being discussed, I'm looking at the utility cash reserve policy for electric and going through these pages, the methodology, the revenue risks, that boils that information down even further. Is that what I should be looking at to understand what we're discussing here a little bit better? Am I on the right page here for that? You're muted.
My apologies. The policy that you're looking at boils down, if you will, the full-blown presentation that PFM provided. Both to the, well, I would say the PUAB presentation was a pretty detailed presentation. Yeah. It really went into depth. And then the one that presented to the council, kind of a little bit more of a summary, didn't go into the exact deep calculations. What this policy is then is just taking the methods that were used to do those calculations and kind of setting those down as these are the methods that we would use to come up with that target. So yes.
Right. Maybe my phraseology was a little wrong, but yes, this is the methods, and these methods get pretty specific.
These, yeah, they do actually. If you would pivot to the summary of revenue and expense attachment that I'd put on there, it did summarize the calculations, and we really kind of struggled with how much detail to put on this. You know, we had presented it a couple different times. We were afraid that if we put the full-blown presentation on there again, it would be kind of a little confusing. So we just lifted this one page that summarized the presentations before, and it. But you can see there are 3 different levels as you're calculating. In fact, I could share this if that would be more beneficial, but there's actual decision points to be made of, do you take a conservative level, a moderate level, and a more conservative, or less conservative, a moderate, and a more conservative level. And in the policy, it addresses which one of those we're doing. We don't say the word conservative or moderate. We say based on this type of rate, or this kilowatt per hour type thing is more of a way of us saying that, well, this is a more conservative way to look at it, or less conservative way. But if you looked at the summary sheet, it kind of shows you on the, I guess, on that conservative scale where things are.
Sure. Well, I appreciate the detail in this, because as everybody knows, I mean, the utilities is such a flux, and what happens today can be changed next month for sure, as well as economic decisions that are made or not made that can affect us. So I was just making sure that I was looking at the right stuff and analyzing it correctly. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions on this item? And hearing none, please call a roll. Have you read it, Becky?
Yeah, bill number 21702. Councilmember Sachs.
You're muted, Mike. Councilman Hoff, you're muted.
What was that? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
We're voting on bill number 21-702.
Okay, and call and roll. Vote.
Yeah, we're on the roll call.
No.
Councilmember Perkins?
Yes.
Stewart?
No.
DeLucy?
No.
Steinmeier?
No.
Hobart?
Yes.
Mayor Weir?
Yes. I'm sorry, I missed. Could you read it back, Becky?
Councilmember Huff was a no. Councilmember Perkins was a yes. Stewart was a no. DeLucy was a no. Steinmeier was a no. Hobart was a yes. And you were a yes.
Okay, so it's failed.
Correct.
Okay, let's move this to our non-ordinance action items.
Council action is requested for consideration of establishing priorities of independent power and light financial surpluses.
Is there any discussion on this item? Hearing none, please.
Madam Mayor, I do
Yes.
have a question for the city manager. There is no fiscal impact noted. It says it's unknown. So does that prior no vote on that other one make this agenda item, even though it's a non-ordinance action item, moot?
My apologies. Yeah, that would, sorry, my microphone was muted. Yes, I really don't understand how this one is necessary with the failure of the last one. The action item prior to this one was to set the cash reserve policy. This one was to amend the upper and lower bounds of the resilience policy. This one is really an orphan child without the other.
Thank you.
Madam City Clerk. In light of that, our options, I mean, we can approve this, reject it, postpone it. If it is read and it does not receive 4 votes, what happens then? Can it come back, or can it not come back at a later date?
I mean, the item can come back at any time. So if it is voted on and it fails, someone can bring it back at a later date. That's not a problem. But if currently there's nothing that staff can do with non-ordinance action item number 1 because of 21702 failing, you'd probably be in a good position just to postpone it indefinitely until you guys are ready to make a decision on that.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make that motion to postpone this one indefinitely.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmembers Huff,
Yes.
Perkins,
Yes.
Stewart,
Yes.
DeLucy,
Yes.
Steinmeier,
Yes.
Hobart,
Yes.
Mayor Ware.
Yes. Motion passes. Item number 2.
Council actions requested for consideration of the development of future electric source.
Is there any discussion on this bill?
Again, Madam Mayor, this fiscal impact is unknown at this time. So my question to the city manager is this worth voting on right now, or should we postpone it?
My response to that, Councilman, would be, like I mentioned earlier in my remarks, we had this set up somewhat linear by setting a cash reserve policy, by setting some priorities of how we would spend money above and beyond that. Absent having that policy, I don't feel I can confidently recommend that we would pursue this at this time because though the energy master plan did dictate that we needed to replace those combustion turbines, we need to now kind of understand that financially how we're going to pursue that, if that's going to be additional debt service being taken on, using available cash on hand. So my recommendation would be to postpone this measure indefinitely as well. To me, these items just don't make sense independent of one another.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, I move to postpone this indefinitely.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please call the roll.
Councilmembers Huff,
No.
Perkins,
You're muted. Councilman Perkins, you're muted.
Sorry. Yes.
Stewart,
Yes.
DeLucy,
Yes.
Steinmeier,
No.
Hobart,
Yes.
Mayor Ware.
Yes. Motion passes. Takes us to council member comments. I will start with, I forget where y'all sit. It's been so long. I'll start with Councilman Stewart.
I have nothing tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Perkins.
Nothing tonight, Madam Mayor.
Councilman Huff.
Yes, I would like to police chief of police on. Am I on? There, I'm on, I guess.
There you go.
Yes, I'm on.
Yes. Chief Halsey?
Yeah, go ahead.
First, the Independent Center, we've been having a set of questions. Basically is why is this happening? Is it unrelated? What do we got about there? What we need to do? Get involved as I know it's a private. I think they pushed it to the limits here.
Yeah, so Councilmember Huff, you were breaking up, but I think you're asking, why is this happening? What are we doing? And you mentioned also it's private property, correct? And I can comment on all those.
Okay.
Yeah, so why it's happening, really don't know that for sure. I think it's social media is the biggest thing. They're using apps that you cannot track. We are checking on, I talked to a council member here recently, Mr. Steinmeier, about this. Apparently, the last time that we had this large gathering, that this occurred in other shopping centers across the United States, 2 or 3, and we're going to look at that as well. I will tell you the management, the owner has only owned this property, I think, since 2019, I believe, but they are making measures and strides to work on added security. They want to make this work. We are going to have a formal meeting with them very soon. I think the owner is going to be coming in town within the next few weeks. The head of security will be here for his company. He should be here, I believe he said, by this weekend. So I will tell you, this last weekend we had a number of officers that we put on overtime. We had 2 sergeants, 10 to 12 officers, and 4 on the inside of the center that were basically posted at all the entrances. And if a juvenile or appear to be a juvenile would come in along with security and the center personnel, they would check their ID and turn them away if they were not accompanied by a adult. And I will tell you, we did have a very good response from the community on Saturday. I was told there's a lot of families that were there shopping, eating. Unfortunately, we've had 2 incidents here recently. The first one, as you all know, was the first one involves a juvenile that, not to get into the investigation too much, but these are known to each other. The incident tonight, what I know at this point is there was a argument inside the center that went outside between individuals, and they exchanged gunfire. No innocent people were hurt or hit. We did have a few cars that were damaged by their actions. I believe that we have both cars that were involved in that incident in our custody at this point. Again, I can't get into too much on that one because, quite frankly, I don't know a lot of details yet, but we are actively working that as well. Does that answer your question, Mr. Huff?
Yeah, I'm real concerned about the safety and welfare of the people out there, but also the businesses. We need to make sure that boards and things are protected. To make sure that I'm wondering Have you reached out to Mall? I know they had these about a year ago, and haven't heard too much about them, number one. And number two, have we thought about, I've discussed this with the mayor also, about single entry out there, maybe to try to control that a little bit better instead of having, no, we're using a lot of our resources. I don't have very many of them anyway. And that is a private business. Otherwise, we have to get involved in the room, whatever it takes. Things out there. That's all I have. On them, just food for thought.
Yeah, great questions, and yeah, that's what we're working with management on. As far as MOUs with the businesses, but I think the thing that the bigger picture here is as well is getting all the businesses on, that 39th Street corridor on the same page, because once in the past when these underage people will show up, if they get removed from the center, they go across the street, to the different businesses and all that. So that's the bigger picture that we're working on right now. But again, I will say, I've got a lot of hope that with the management and the owner, that they will do their part. I think they understand how important the Independence Center is, not only to them, but us as a community. And I will tell you, my family shops there. They continue to shop there. And we just had some unfortunate incidents here recently, but I encourage everybody to continue to shop, and we will continue to do our part in working with management and the owner as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Councilmember DeLucy.
Two things, Madam Mayor. Thank you. I understand that City Hall is only open 2 days a week.
Yes.
And I'm concerned with us only being open 2 days a week because our phone system isn't working either. So I don't know what the answer is, Mr. City Manager, but today I tried to reach somebody at City Hall and I got the message telling the world that we have COVID problems and I'd be connected to the general operating number, and that never happened. So we either have to have somebody answer a phone or maybe open City Hall more than 2 days a week. And second, I really would like some information on the fiscal notes for each item on our agendas. I really do not appreciate having to go and try and figure out what the ordinance or the resolution will cost the citizens. I don't think it's appropriate for me to look at page 140 or page 141 and guess. So if we could please make those changes, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Just to refresh your memories, due to the increase in community spread of COVID-19 under the state of emergency, we made a declaration to close City Hall to the public all but 2 days a week, and to require our staff to work from home as much as possible so that we could contain the community spread of COVID-19. So that's why that determination was made. Councilman Steinmeier.
Nothing tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Yes. Councilman Hobart.
I will try to not get too serious and be fairly brief. I just wanted to thank the folks from PFM. I wanted to thank the PUAB, and I wanted to thank the members of city government that worked to put together the proposal to try and help us govern IPL and to help IPL start to move forward, which really is sort of actually just being brought current. Moving forward. I thank you very much to everybody. This is a huge issue of consternation. If there's anything that pops up in daily conversation with regular folks, my neighbors, my parents, anybody around town, it's IPL. It's utility rates. It's what are we going to do? What are you doing? What are we going to do? These are big decisions. I really, and it makes me hesitant and timid about taking action. It really does. I hold myself to a high standard on decision making. Councilmember DeLucia does too. That's sort of our requirement in our professions. But PFM and the work everybody put into it, plus the PUAB support, you know, it really gives me some confidence that this is, even though it failed tonight, it sounds like it was an excellent place to start the discussion. So I really do appreciate everybody's effort and work. Other than that, just Happy New Year to everybody, and thank you, Chief Halsey. It is never, ever, ever, ever a desire for a police chief or department to have to deal with a sort of a continuing or intermittent issues like they're dealing with at the Independence Center. So I appreciate the hard work they're putting in, and just know that the city council supports you, and we also support the owners of the Independence Center and the businesses out there that I know we all want to do what we can to help out if there's anything we can do. And that's all for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. We all hold ourselves to a high standard in decision making regardless of our chosen profession. And that's why we're all here and why we were all elected to represent the citizens of this city and to work in a very complex city with 3 public utilities. Yes, a lot of work and preparation went into this evening. Obviously, more work needs to be done. You know, I've spent the last, over these holidays, really trying to absorb and evaluate this information and make good decisions. But, this is what we're called upon to do. And we will continue to have these discussions. There was no public hearing held at the PUAB. So unfortunately, and I know we're all tired of it, our circumstances around public health, which we've fought very hard to make great strides in this year, and I'm very proud of what we've achieved, are really requiring that we use this format for the time being, and I'm as eager as anybody to stop using it. But we made a determination that the health of our community was going to come first, and this is what the charter provides for, to make decisions during this period of time. So it is frustrating. Our staff, many took a much deserved break after having no summer vacations, no time off, very little time off for the last 10 months. So I'm pleased that they were able to use some of their time over the winter holidays to utilize the vacation time that they're entitled to, and certainly some much deserved time off. So that did, I'm sure, cause some disruption in service, but I think that we can all provide them a little bit of grace in that regard. We will continue our council strategic planning. We will be scheduling that, I hope, sometime later this month to review the results of the surveying, that community surveying that we did following our initial session that took place in August. And I'm certain that issues surrounding our utilities, issues regarding our finances, issues regarding long-term generation of power will be a part of that discussion. So the work that has been done. It certainly is appreciated, and we will continue to take some time to get the answers that we need, that our citizens are demanding, to try to make good decisions for the long term of our community. So I'm always look at every year, new year with optimism, and this one is no exception. And in reflecting on 2020, regardless of, obviously the pandemic dominating everything, we accomplished some great things for our city. The EDC put out a report this morning of their accomplishments from 2020. It's really quite remarkable what they were able to do. Same with many other organizations. So we'll just continue to work and make these difficult and necessary decisions for our community. Mr. City Manager, anything else this evening?
Nothing tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. We are adjourned.